Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I know it's hot. Thank you, President Eisgruber. It is really such an honor to be with you on this occasion. Families, as a mom of 4, including a Princetonian who's here with me today, I can begin to imagine how proud you must be of your graduates. Faculty and staff, I hope you are feeling so fulfilled about the role you've played in supporting these young people. And class of 2022, congratulations. Let's hear it for you and each other. I would be tempted to call you all an activist generation. You're graduating at a time when threats to the well-being of people and the planet are more visible than ever. Your generation in particular has been so active, weighing in about what justice requires. You're more committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability than any that has come before. And so it's tempting to call yours an activist generation. But looking out at you as soon-to-be graduates, it's premature to define you. It's the choices you're about to make and that you'll make in the coming years about what to do with your time and energy that will define you. So I am grateful to have the chance to talk with you at this pivotal juncture, the commencement of your journey beyond Princeton's walls, an occasion that for many will mark the first moment you felt discretion over what to do with yourselves. I'm thinking back to my own graduation 33 years ago. Right after the ceremony, my parents drove me to New York City and dropped me off. I had 2 trash bags of clothes, a lamp, a futon, and a room in an apartment that I was going to share with other recent grads. Living off a seed grant, I was going to spend my summer trying to work my way into the offices of educators, potential donors, and anyone else who could help get Teach for America off the ground. No one would be more surprised than I would have been at that point if you had told me that I would still be pursuing the same mission 33 years later. I'm so grateful for the lessons I've fallen into along the way that has enabled this journey, and now for the chance to share them with you in the hope that they'll be helpful in informing your own choices. So as you've heard, my path began with my Princeton thesis. This said, I'm not the role model thesis writer President Eisgruber likely thought he was getting. I had not given a moment's thought to what I would write about before late fall of my senior year. I was in a deep funk, which among other things had led me into some sort of denial that I would need to write a thesis in order to graduate. I was in this state of mind, this malaise, because I simply could not figure out what I wanted to do after I graduated. I'd applied to the sectors recruiting us liberal arts graduates at the time, but was searching and searching for something else. I knew that by nature I was going to work relentlessly at whatever I did, and I just really wanted to make sure that all that work mattered. At some point, I began fixating on the idea of putting my energy into the field of education. I had grown very conscious that it was my education in a strong public school system and then at this fine institution that had led me to feel a sense of freedom and that the whole world was open to me. I'd also become increasingly aware of the inequities in education at Princeton, of all places, because I'd seen here how differently prepared students were to do well and thrive based on where they'd come from. So I looked into teaching in New York City public schools. I didn't have much hope that this would be a possibility for a public policy major like myself, but I discovered that in fact it would be possible. If I waited until after Labor Day, the system would realize how many vacancies it had, at which point it would relax the typical licensure requirements. One day in November of my senior year, This led to an inspiration. Why weren't we being recruited to teach as aggressively as we were being recruited to work in banks? I had a deep sense that I was not alone, that thousands of other graduating seniors of all different backgrounds and all different majors were also searching for meaningful post-graduation pursuits. Wouldn't teaching be the one that most called on our leadership and gave us the most immediate path to impact? I couldn't stop thinking about the power of this idea for the sake of children and young people who need every additional committed teacher, and for our country, which would benefit from leaders shaped by experience working in urban and rural communities. This was, at the very least, the answer to my growing recognition that I really did need a thesis topic. The more I researched, the more obsessed I became, and at the end of it all, I produced a 177-page thesis making the case for creating a National Teacher Corps, with a foreword about how I'd become determined to make it happen. And so I can now thank the thesis requirement that had at one point seemed so unimportant to me for providing the answer to my search for a meaningful post-graduation pursuit. Thank you, Princeton. I found my way to seed funding, a team of other recent grads, and ultimately thousands of others who were also inspired by this idea. From the start, my days were not all fun and joy. In fact, they have often been excruciating and stressful, comprised of a humbling learning curve and challenges that would put me far outside my comfort zone. But never has there been a day in this work when I have doubted that what my colleagues and I were doing was worth it. I feel so grateful for the revelation that had sent me into that malaise about the importance of aligning our career paths with the issues we care about. For your generation that is more aware of and passionate about tackling injustice than any before, my hope is that you will recognize that your time is your biggest asset, and that driven by your values and the purpose of shaping a better future, you will be intentional and conscious about where you put your energy. In this era, there's more attention than ever, especially among your generation, on personal well-being and finding balance. What I've seen is that the highest form of well-being is the exhilaration that comes from immersing ourselves in things that matter. The path to happiness is not balance per se, but rather congruence between the values we hold most dear and where we spend our energy. Now, lest you think that I had it all figured out upon my graduation, I have to admit that I didn't think I would be working on this for long. Blessed with the naivete of a 21-year-old, I figured we'd build the equivalent of the Peace Corps in 2 to 3 years. And then as it became clear that I had completely underestimated what it would take, I figured somebody else would be much better suited to enable this to thrive anyway. A few years in, I got a big job offer. I was so excited. I envisioned myself taking it. But tortured over the decision, I brought together some of our founding team members to deliberate it. I still remember the conversation at Cafe Lalo in New York City. Over the course of the afternoon, my friends and colleagues talked me into staying the course at Teach for America. They pointed to the signs that we really were onto something, that this work of ours was making a real impact for students, and that it was also changing something in the teachers and leading them to go on to challenge the unjust systems in which they were working in really important ways. And yet we all agreed we were very, very far from living into our potential. Doing so would take a lot more time. I think back to that conversation with so much gratitude. It led me to settle in at Teach for America, to stop contemplating ways out and on to the next big thing. Settling in enabled me to go on a deeper learning journey. I began thinking beyond the day-to-day challenges that were more than enough to keep me busy and considering what we were learning in classrooms and communities. I began spending more time visiting teachers who were having a particularly transformational impact and realized that we could see patterns across them that would enable us to better train and support other teachers. With time, I learned from Teach for America's alumni who were leading whole schools having a transformational impact and pioneering innovations to address the massive gaps in the system. Over the years, as I grew in my sense that with enough leadership, we really could solve these systemic inequities, I would begin exploring what it would take to shift the outcomes for kids across whole communities and how to develop the leadership for that kind of transformation. One of my own sons once told me that if he'd met me 10 years into this endeavor, he might have been a little disappointed. I mean, given the start I got putting my thesis into action and all, he would have assumed I would have made more of myself by then. But it was really that decision to focus and go deep that was the difference between creating a nice boutique organization and building something that would have a shot at making a meaningful impact. There's an instinct among ambitious and driven people like ourselves to manage our career paths through a constant search for more and better. I'm so grateful for the push from my colleagues that led me to recognize that sometimes more and better comes not from moving up and on, but from going deep. I hope you too will have the fulfillment that comes from the pursuit of deep impact rather than the pursuit of impressive resumes. Don't wait to consider these questions. Over these decades, I've seen that our society's injustices are solvable, but they are also massive and complex, and it takes a lot of time to make a meaningful impact in the face of them. So the path of no regrets is to start early. Whatever disappointment it might have been to my son, 15 years into this work, I still had my head down. I was working to make Teach for America bigger and better. One day, I found an accomplished social entrepreneur, Shaheen Mistry, waiting for me in my office. She told me that she ran after-school programs in India, had met some Teach for America alumni teaching in them, and was determined that her country needed a Teach for India. She asked me to visit her, and on that trip, I saw that the circumstances of marginalized children in India were more similar to the circumstances of the most marginalized students in my own country than of India's privileged young people. The solutions to these inequities would be much more shareable across borders than I had ever considered. I had never before thought about the relevance of Teach for America's approach for the rest of the world, but within 1 year, we heard from people in 13 different countries who were thinking about it. Today, Teach for All's network of partner organizations is inspiring thousands of promising leaders across more than 60 countries, from Afghanistan to Ukraine, to channel their energy towards ensuring that all children in their countries fulfill their potential. And by enabling everyone to learn from each other, our network is enabling all of us to make more progress. If that Princeton thesis requirement had not inspired me to set off on this effort as early as it did, it's unlikely that I would have had the chance to pursue this global work. I wouldn't have had the chance to learn from so many brilliant people across such diverse cultural contexts who have led me to rethink so much, from the purpose of education to how we can develop the leadership we need. For decades, the common path has been to pursue professional success and only then figure out how to engage with social issues. But if you're tackling big, important challenges, that paradigm will keep you from having all the impact you have the potential to have, and from the fulfillment that comes from playing the long game. Class of 2022, these are uncertain times that need your energy and leadership more than ever. As Princeton students, with the privilege of a world-class education and the networks and credibility that come with it, you have a particular responsibility to rise to that challenge. Don't think that advocacy efforts in the wake of the latest injustice will sufficiently ameliorate your moral responsibility to lead lives in the nation's service and in the service of humanity. Because it's doing that, the heavy lifting of actually reshaping our systems, that will create a just world. You have worked so hard to earn these degrees. Now it's time to celebrate and then to put them to work. I'm excited for you on this eve of your graduation. Your choices will tell us a lot about the trajectory of our country and our world, and for all of our sakes, I wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.